to another episode of Victoria the Bard. I tell stories of the fantastical kind. And today, I want to talk a bit about court jesters. They're very versatile people. They could juggle sometimes, which I cannot do. They told stories, did magic tricks, sometimes did a bit of comedy. Anyway, but they were sometimes called fools on the way they acted. But today, I will not be talking about just jesters. I will be talking about a variety of fools. Now, the story is centered around a king, and this king ruled his people pretty well. Now, one day, the king was getting ready for court, and so he put on all his kingly robes and his jewelry and his crown, and went to reach for the royal ring, but it was gone. The king was very confused, so he searched his bedchambers and looked for it everywhere, but he could not find it. So he asked his servants, do any of you know where my ring has gone? And they said, no, sire, except for one. The queen's maidservant said, Sire, I believe I saw the stable boy leave your chambers the other night. And he had something in his pocket. I don't know if it was the ring, but he certainly had something. So the king ordered the stable boy to be arrested and brought to him at once. Now the king looked at him and said, why did you steal my ring, and where is it? And the stable boy said, Sire, I stole no ring of yours. The king said, absurd, I have witnesses that prove you did. Again, the stable boy pleaded innocent. He said, I have not been in your bedchambers. I don't know how I could have stolen the ring. So, the king, being as hot-tempered as he was, ordered the stable boy into the dungeon. Now, the king didn't really think a second thought of it, so he went to bed. But that night he could not sleep. He tossed and turned, and something in his heart twinged for the stable boy, and he began to believe him. So, the next morning he went down to the dungeons and said to the stable boy, if you do not have my ring, who does? And the stable boy said, now that I think of it, I believe I saw it in one of the kitchen maid's apron pockets. So the king ordered all the kitchen maids to join him in court, and he made each of them empty out their apron pockets, and the last one that emptied it had the ring in there. The girl was mortified. She looked at the ring and said, I don't know where this came from. I didn't steal the ring, sire. And he didn't listen. He took her away and ordered the stable boy out of the dungeon and her to be brought in. Now, he was about ready to retrieve the royal ring when a page burst into the court and said, Sire, there's a challenging knight out there. He wants to take your throne. And so the king, without a second thought, followed the page out. But there was no challenging knight. He looked everywhere, but there was none to be seen. He looked at the page, and the page said, I must have been mistaken, your majesty, and walked off. The king thought this was very curious, but went on. He went back into the court hall, and he said, give me my ring. But none of the knights had it. He made all the knights swore they didn't have the ring, and they all swore. But the ring could still not be found. So the king, a bit angry, carried on with the rest of his day. Now, about 2 days later, he called for a tournament. Now, tournaments were grand times in the court. There was jousting and sword fighting and challenges of all kinds to challenge the brave knights. And there was people yelling and banners and chanting the knight's name. And it was just a glorious time. And this tournament's, Anyway, the knights battled bravely. They sword fought and all the way up the ranks until there were only 2 knights left. Now, one of the knights, during the last sword fight, his gauntlet came off. But he continued fighting, and he won. He presented himself to the king, and as the king was about to grant him his prize, he looked down at the knight's hand and saw the royal ring. The king ordered the knight into the dungeon. Now, finally having the royal ring in his possession once more, the king went to bed that night. could not sleep again. He felt in his heart that something was wrong here. He didn't know what, but there was something, and he had to get the truth. So the next day, he went to his private jeweler and said, I need 2 more rings, exactly the shape and size of the royal ring. And so the jeweler did as he asked, and he gave those 2 rings to another very trustworthy knight. And the knight took them, and the king said, place one secretly into the stable boy's house, and the other into the kitchen maid's cell. So the knight did as he asked. And the next morning, while the guards were patrolling the city, they found the ring in the stable boy's house, and they found the ring in the kitchen maid's cell. They brought them to the king. They brought to the stable boy, the kitchen maid, and the untrustworthy knight, thinking he had to do something with this. And the king looked at him and said, this can be none other than witchcraft. And he said, does any of you have any confessions you would like to make? They were all too stunned. They said nothing. And so the king said, well, since we don't know which one of you is the witch, we just have to ban you all. So the next morning was their scheduled execution. They were brought out into the keep, and all the kingdom was gathered there, and they were watching it. There were 3 poles, each surrounded by firewood, but the king made a special request to the executioner. Now this request was secret, and it has been kept a secret, but it had something to do with 3 buckets of water. Now the next morning, the criminals were brought to the posts and tied up, and the king said, do you have any more confessions to make? They were too stunned to say anything once more, and so the king ordered the fire to be dropped onto the woodpile. But suddenly, the stable boy exclaimed, I did it, sire! I stole the ring, and then I put it in one of the kitchen maid's apron pockets. And then suddenly another voice from the kingdom hollered up and jumped onto the platform where they were being burned and said, sire, I am one of the kitchen maids. I found the ring in my apron pocket and put it in hers. And then, above all others, the untrustworthy knight hollered above the rest, I hired the page to tell you that there was a challenging knight outside, while I could steal the ring for myself. The king looked at them and shrugged and walked away. Now the 3 tied up could only imagine that the flames were starting to spring up. They were going to burn them any second now, so they closed their eyes. But after a moment, they felt no heat. They opened their eyes again and looked down, and the flames had not caught. Suddenly the king walked back out onto his balcony and said, take them to the dungeon. I will speak with them later. So, without an explanation, the 3, the stable boy, the real guilty kitchen maid, and the untrustworthy knight, were led down to the cells. That night the king came back to the cells. The 3 said, sire, why didn't we burn? And the king said, you fools! Don't you know what wood does not catch fire? And he walked away. Well, there you have it. Story of a foolish king, a foolish stable boy, a foolish kitchen maid, and a foolish knight. So I shall leave you with the words of the great Alfred Lord Tennyson. O purblind race of miserable men, how many of us at this very hour do forge a lifelong trouble for ourselves by taking true for false and false for true? Fare thee well, my friends.